Good afternoon, everyone. Just a few things here at the top. We'll get right to your questions. First, as you may have seen, Secretary Austin was at the United States Military Academy at West Point yesterday, where he delivered a speech to the Corps of Cadets. Reflecting on his own time as a West Point cadet, his public service career, and his experience on the battlefield, the Secretary shared thoughts and advice stemming from his 45 years serving as a soldier and as the Secretary of Defense for the cadets as they prepare to become future leaders in the United States Army. Transcript of the speech as well as a video are posted on the DoD website at defense.gov. Shifting gears, earlier today, Secretary Austin hosted the Armenian Minister of Defense at the Pentagon for a bilateral meeting, the first such meeting in 2 decades. The leaders reaffirmed the strategic partnership between our two countries and also reaffirmed our shared objective of an enduring peace in the South Caucasus. The two leaders also discussed ongoing and future security cooperation efforts such as military education and professionalization, institutional capacity building, and training. Full readout will be available on defense.gov later today. Looking ahead, Secretary Austin will depart tomorrow for Simi Valley, California to attend the 2024 Reagan National Defense Forum. This marks the Secretary's 4th year attending the forum, and on Saturday, December 7, he'll deliver the keynote address, which will be live streamed. Additionally, alongside Senate Republican leader Mitch McConnell, Secretary Austin will also be the recipient of the Ronald Reagan Peace Through Strength Award from the Ronald Reagan Presidential Foundation and Institute. Following the Reagan National Defense Forum, Secretary Austin will travel to Tokyo, Japan for a multi-day visit. This trip marks his 13th visit to the Indo-Pacific as Secretary of Defense and comes as the department continues its historic efforts to bolster our partnerships and alliances and advance a shared vision of peace, security, and prosperity in the region. We'll have much more to share on the Secretary's engagements in Japan soon. Separately, on Tuesday, I highlighted U.S. self-defense strikes in the vicinity of MSS Euphrates in Syria when U.S. forces faced an imminent danger due to several threats to include rockets and mortars fired in the direction of U.S. forces in the area. U.S. Central Command has advised that 3 U.S. service members are being evaluated for possible TBI. As you know, those numbers can fluctuate, and I'm not aware of any other injuries at this time. Again, we'll not hesitate to take appropriate action to protect our forces if they are threatened. And finally, throughout his tenure, Secretary Austin has prioritized the development and rapid fielding of capabilities to counter the urgent and growing threat posed by unmanned systems. This week, the Secretary signed a classified strategy for countering unmanned systems to unify the department's approach to countering these systems that looks across domains, characteristics, and timeframes. Unmanned systems, more commonly known as drones, have the potential to pose both an urgent and enduring threat to U.S. personnel, facilities, and assets overseas, and increasingly in the U.S. homeland. As you know, the threats presented by these systems are changing how wars are fought. With this singular strategy for countering unmanned systems in conjunction with other major DoD initiatives like the Joint Counter Small UAS Office and Replicator 2, the DoD is orienting around a common understanding of the challenge and a comprehensive approach to addressing it. And with that, I'm happy to take your questions. We'll start with AP Lita.
Thank you, Pat. A quick question on transition. Can you just update us? Has there been any steps or any movement at all for any transition meetings or anything here in the Pentagon?
Lita, what I would tell you is no contact at this stage. I do understand that the transition team has signed the DOJ MOU, but we're awaiting word from the Federal Transition Coordinator and the Trump transition team regarding the next steps.
Okay.
Of course, we here at the DoD are prepared to support a calm, orderly transition and ensure that the landing team has all the necessary information consistent with governing documents and agreements to ensure that they're prepared to perform their function duties on day one.
And then just a quick second question. You talked about this new classified strategy. And you had talked before about that there were some incursions, particularly down in Virginia, over military facilities, and there's been others. Is there anything in the strategy that's more tactical that allows commanders to do anything, or is this just a broad statement of policy?
Of course, it's got all kinds of good information, but it's classified, so I can't talk about it. No. So really, Lita, again, recognizing that the strategy is classified, we will have an unclassified fact sheet that we'll be providing soon. Really, just kind of looking at how we'll approach this. One is ensuring that the department is prepared to conduct counter unmanned system operations, counter UAS operations. Two is looking at how we respond to incidents that do occur by pulling together subject matter experts and resources. And then third is tracking equipment and counter UAS equipment, UAS, one aspect of drones. So really, again, broad brush. It's kind of looking at this in a comprehensive and cohesive way. Again, I'm not going to go into the specific tactics, techniques, procedures at this point, but it enables the department to approach this in a way, again, that's comprehensive, cohesive, and holistic. Thanks. Carla.
Thanks. Going back to Syria, you mentioned the 3 service members being evaluated for TBIs. Who is responsible for that attack? Who did the U.S. military target on Tuesday?
Yeah, again, as I highlighted on Tuesday, I mean, that's something that we're still assessing. It's, again, important to highlight that region has been so first of all, we know that Iranian-backed militia groups operate in that area. We also know that Syrian regime forces operate in that area. But this location has been used in the past by groups like Iranian-backed militias to target U.S. forces at MSS Euphrates. But again, in terms of who is operating those vehicles or who is firing those rockets and mortars, that is something that, as I understand it, CENTCOM is still assessing.
True, but you did mention a T-64 tank last time. Isn't that normally something that's used by the Syrians or the Russians, not Iranian militia groups?
Entirely possible, Carl. Again, as I just highlighted, I mean, we do know that there are Syrian regime forces in that area, but in terms of at that moment and who is doing what, that's something that, again, as I understand it, CENTCOM still looking at. So.
Okay, and then one last one on Ukraine. Is the Pentagon still committed to using up all of the funds that Congress approved to send to Ukraine? I think we're at $6 billion PDA left and $2 billion roughly in USAI.
Right, 2.21 billion in USAI and 6.8 billion in PDA. And again, to be clear, the direction that we've received from the White House is to make every effort to continue to rush security assistance to Ukraine and employ the authorities that we have, and we're doing exactly that. I mean, the thing that hasn't changed is the sense of urgency within the department in terms of supporting Ukraine, understanding that the fight that they're in, and we've been doing that for upwards of 3 years, almost 3 years now, and we'll continue to do that and continue to ensure that we're speaking with them and our allies and partners to enable Ukraine to defend its freedom and its sovereignty. Constantine.
Thanks, Pat. Moving to South Korea, could you give us an update on the status of U.S. forces in South Korea? And specifically, can you speak to whether troops there are still under any restrictions?
So first of all, to my knowledge, Constantine, no change in force posture. And, we're obviously doing due diligence in terms of accountability and things like that, but I'm not aware of any significant impact operationally, physically, safety-wise on any U.S. forces in South Korea. Of course, we are in contact with our ROK counterparts, the Ministry of Defense, but yeah, bottom line is I'm not aware of any impact in that regard.
And just to be clear, troops are free to go off base as they choose?
To my knowledge, that's the case. Of course, certainly I'd recommend you reach out to USFK, but I'm not aware of any changes in that regard. Thank you very much. Brandy. No,
Thank you, Pat. On the new counter unmanned strategy, how long was that in the making, and was it prompted by the sort of recent increasing reports of incursions over U.S. military bases both abroad and in the States?
Thanks, Brandy. I don't have a specific time frame to give you other than to say that this has been, I'm confident that this has been work that's been going on for some time. I mean, If you go, you've been following this very closely. You know the impact that drones have had on the battlefield. This is not necessarily a new thing, but what we're seeing is the way that drones are being applied, the impact of how they're being used is something that, again, we can't just deal with ad hoc. We need to do this in a comprehensive, cohesive manner. And so that's really what this strategy does, is it essentially enables the department to look across the entire department and our interagency partners how we can best work together to address this. So to answer your question, no, this is not a response to recent events. This is work that's been going on for some time, and obviously very important work.
Do you have any new information about progress that's been made between the U.S. and U.K. militaries getting to the bottom of those previous incursions, and have there been any more?
Yeah, I don't have any updates to pass along from the podium here, Brandy. I'd recommend you call U.S. Air Forces in Europe or the U.K. Ministry of Defense. Thanks, Fadi.
Thank you, General. So concerning those 3 U.S. soldiers who are being evaluated for the potential TBI, where were they when that impact happened, what raised the concern of potential?
Yeah, again, this is all, in the vicinity of MSS Euphrates in that region down there.
Inside the wire or outside the wire?
That's as detailed as I'm going to get.
On Tuesday, I asked you whether the U.S. Provided support for SDF forces attack on the 7 villages where the SAA is located. They have positions there, and you referred me to the SDF. I'm asking you as a spokesperson for the Pentagon, did your forces provide any support for the SDF in that operation?
Look, our forces are in Syria to conduct a counter-ISIS operation, right? The enduring defeat of ISIS. They have partnered with the SDF on those missions. Certainly they communicate with the SDF on a frequent basis, as partners do, but our forces in that region were threatened. We took action to mitigate that threat, and we'll do so again. And so, again, they're communicating with one another. We're aware of what the SDF is doing. I'm not going to talk about SDF operations. I'll let them talk about their operations. But let me just be crystal clear. Our forces are in Syria to conduct the enduring defeat of ISIS mission. We're doing that in partnership with the SDF, and I'm just going to leave it there.
With all due respect, General, I'm not asking about SDF operations. I'm asking about your operations. Did the U.S. forces provide support for SDF offensive on SAA positions in those 7 villages east?
If you're asking were U.S. forces, participating in combined arms maneuver with the SDF, the answer is no. All right.
That's not my question.
Okay.
Did you provide?
I've answered the question.
So
our forces are in Syria.
I'm not getting
okay.
No from you. I mean, for transparency, no. That's no, right?
John, what do you got?
Thank you.
Thank you, General. About Syria, after Aleppo, it looks like the opposition forces are moving southward toward other important cities in Syria, like Homs and Hama. And is your position changing because the thing is evaluating to something or evolving to something bigger, it seems? Do you have any communication at this phase with the opposition forces or through your Turkish allies on the developments in Syria?
I mean, we're certainly monitoring the situation closely. Again, the U.S. has no role in what's happening right now in terms of northwestern Syria and the HTS and their operations and the Syrian regime. I mean, again, as you know, the Syrian civil war has been going on for a while. This is a new development in that war. But again, we're monitoring closely, very aware of the destabilizing effect. As we've said earlier, we call on all parties to de-escalate to ensure the protection of minorities groups in the region. We don't want to see more death and destruction in that regard. But again, we're no involvement by the U.S. Thanks, Matt.
Thanks, Matt. On Syria, an SDF spokesperson said that ISIS is claiming to have control over significant portions of the Homs and Deir ez-Zor regions. Does that match your assessment? Is ISIS gaining ground? And can you give us any update on the success that American counterterror forces are having or not having in the area?
To my knowledge, I'm not aware of ISIS taking any type of, taking significant territory. We do know that ISIS does maintain a capability for obvious reasons, which is why we're there. We do see them continuing to plan and conduct attacks, which again is why we're there, working with the SDF, which is also supporting counter ISIS operations. So it's a threat we obviously have to take seriously, because what we don't want to see is a resurgence, back to what we saw a decade ago. So I'll just leave it there. Thanks. Charlie.
Thank you, General. Have you, have your colleagues have any more deconfliction conversations with the Russians in Syria?
I don't have anything to read out on that front. Yeah.
Okay, but then a few days ago you said that an A-10 had been used in close combat or at least close protection. That came out a few days later. Do we have any more information about an A-10 being used in the ground operations that are being conducted by the SDF?
So I answered this question on Tuesday, which is why I'm looking confused. So an A-10 conducted a self-defense strike near MSS Euphrates when some individuals were establishing a rocket rail. The A-10s went in, took it out, period, dot. Self-defense, not in support of any kind of, operations by any other groups that are going on. This is defending our forces.
Right.
That simple.
But I was asking since then.
No, I'm not aware of anything. Thanks. Janie.
Thank you, General. Two questions on South Korea and issues related to South Korea and the United States. First question. How do you assess the fact that South Korea's martial law declaration was inevitably lifted without armed conflict under the president's authorities to protect liberal democracy and prevent national security threats?
I mean, that's really a question that you need to ask the ROK government about. I'm not going to comment on their domestic. No, I'm not going to get into discussing allied nations' domestic politics or management.
Second question. The United States, South Korea Nuclear Consultative Group, NCG meeting, the last meeting of the Biden administration was scheduled to be held in Washington, D.C. this week, but was canceled. Can you tell us why it was canceled, or will you resume on a different day?
I don't have any updates to provide in terms of rescheduling. Again, just given the events in ROK, it was deemed a prudent measure, and we'll keep you updated in terms of a new date when that's rescheduled. Thank you. Warren.
Two questions in the Middle East, one Syria, one Lebanon. What steps has the U.S. military taken in Syria in light of the security situation and to prepare for what looks like the possible collapse of the Assad regime?
So I'm not going to speculate about the future of the Assad regime. Oren, again, our forces are in Syria to support the enduring defeat of ISIS. We're obviously going to take appropriate measures to ensure that those forces are protected. But and as it relates to the ongoing Syrian civil war and what you see in terms of the various groups fighting one another, I mean, that's something that we're going to continue to monitor. As we've highlighted, we would call on all parties to de-escalate. But from a U.S. military standpoint, our focus continues to be on the Defeat ISIS mission.
And then can you update us on the effort of General Jasper Jeffers as part of the ceasefire monitoring mechanism? Has that advanced to a point where it is fully functioning, or what can you say to that?
I don't have any more detailed updates to provide from what I gave out on Tuesday. General Jeffers is in Beirut working out of the embassy. But again, we'll keep you updated as we have new information to provide. Let me go back to Wafa. Yep.
Thank you, General. In light of the quick advances the opposition in Syria is making, if you can explain a little bit how the Pentagon will address the new circumstances on the ground in Syria. Is the Pentagon ready to engage with elements of this opposition? And also, are these circumstances will have impact on the U.S. forces posture in Syria?
So let me make sure, just to clarify, are you asking, will the U.S. reach out to HTS
elements of this opposition?
No. I mean, it is a terrorist group, so no plans to do that. And again, as I mentioned, the U.S. has nothing to do with that offensive. And as far as it relates to U.S. personnel in Syria, I'll say it again. The whole reason our forces are there and have been there is to support the enduring defeat of ISIS mission. We'll continue to work with partners like the SDF toward that end. But that is our mission. So.
Do you have any concerns that this situation in Syria can spill out into Iraq?
Well, I mean, that's what you saw 10 years ago, right? As essentially the security vacuum that was created by the repressive measures of the Assad regime instigated the rise of ISIS, which did spill over into Iraq, which is why U.S. forces have been working very closely with an international coalition for a decade now to prevent the resurgence of ISIS so that can be contained. Again, as it relates to what's going on in northwestern Syria, we're obviously all watching. We want to see a de-escalation. We understand the potential ramifications regionally, but right now, from a U.S. military standpoint, our focus continues to be on preventing an ISIS resurgence.
There are some reports about Russia withdrawing naval assets from Syria. Do you have anything on this?
I don't. I'd have to refer you to the Russian MOD. Let me go to the phone real quick. Jeff Shogel, task and purpose.
Hi. I know this has been covered, but Al Monitor is reporting that when the U.S. troops on Tuesday were attacked, they were supporting a militia, possibly part of the SDF, that was fighting the Assad regime. And I was just wondering if there's any information about this. I know you may say, Jeff, you need to talk to the Assad regime, but I think they're looking at flight tickets and hotels at the moment.
Yeah, thanks, Jeff. I mean, very similar question to what your colleague Fadi just asked. And so I'll try again. So we have U.S. forces that are operating at MSS Euphrates. They're obviously in partnership with the SDF when it comes to the enduring defeat of ISIS mission. We do communicate with the SDF. We are aware in many cases of their operations to ensure that our forces know who's doing what. In this particular case, I'm not going to talk about SDF operations. I'm not an SDF spokesperson, and so I'm just not going to do that. U.S. forces are in that region. Are they communicating with the SDF? Of course. Were U.S. forces threatened when the elements that I highlighted earlier started threatening our forces? We took appropriate action to mitigate that threat, protect our forces. Again, our mission in Syria has not changed. It's the enduring defeat of ISIS. And again, I'll leave it there. Let me go to Jeff, Defense News. All right, Howard from the War Zone.
Hey, thanks. In a completely different vein, I wanted to ask you about NGAD, and can you tell me why the program was punted over to the Trump administration? And also, are there any other big programs on the chopping block, like maybe Sentinel or Replicator?
I'm sorry, which program were you saying was punted to the Trump administration?
Program or Replicator?
Well, Howard, I'm not going to talk or speculate about the future. I mean, as you know, the Department of Defense, our mission is to defend the country, and that doesn't necessarily mean that we're putting time limits on the things that we do. And so, unmanned systems, drones, are going to be something, again, that we will need to take a holistic, comprehensive approach to addressing for all the reasons that as you see playing out in places like Ukraine and other areas of the world. So the Department of Defense is administration agnostic in that regard, and that our focus is on defending the country. Again, I won't speculate on what future administrations may do, but I can be very confident in saying that we'll do everything we need to do to defend this country. Thank you. Take a couple more here. You go to Noah, and then we'll go to Jared.
Just to start out with a couple cleanup questions. You said soon on a fact sheet releasing about the new strategy. When is soon?
hopefully today.
And on the conversations with the counterparts in the ROK, can you tell us what level those are and when they've occurred? I'm assuming not at the Secretary's level.
Yeah, I don't have anything to read out in terms of, or announce in terms of the Secretary speaking to the ROK Minister of Defense. Certainly will keep you updated in that regard. We have been in contact with the ROK Ministry of Defense at multiple levels, to include from here in DoD, but I don't have any dates to pass along in that regard.
And just a quick last one. There was a call reported and acknowledged later between the chairman and General Gerasimov of Russia that happened last week. And the call was not immediately read out afterward, given that there was secrecy concerns between the two of them. I was wondering if we can have a commitment from you, sitting at the top of the briefing room here, to read out in the future such calls, given that the details that are provided are not exactly comprehensive in all of them.
Yeah, look, I mean, as far as Joint Staff goes, I'd refer you to Joint Staff. Certainly I know, just like we do, they endeavor to do all they can to be as transparent as possible about these kinds of things. And so certainly, we'll continue to work toward that end, Noah. Jared, and then we'll get you a question as long as it's related to current news of the day. Yes, sir.
Thanks, sir. I think we've covered this pretty well, but I just wanted to make sure we cover every base here. You mentioned there that what transpired in Deir ez-Zor, there was no U.S. combined arms maneuver with the SDF, but that the U.S. is often aware of their operations. Were U.S. forces in and around in the vicinity of MSS Euphrates, were they in communication with and advising SDF elements, either conducting their operation or overseeing it? I mean, I'm asking about the role of U.S. forces.
Jared, I appreciate the questions, but I'm just not going to have any more to provide beyond what I've already provided.
Okay, and can you confirm whether U.S. forces did or did not kinetically engage in that area before coming under fire?
Our forces engaged in self-defense, period, dot. Okay?
Thanks.
I'll say it again. They engaged in self-defense because our forces were threatened. And our forces are in Syria to support the enduring defeat of ISIS. All right, last question.
Two, please.
As long as it's news of the day, sir.
Yes, sir, it is on the news of the day. Right. Mr. Anthony Chanella's senior intelligence officer, before he committed suicide in Arlington, he had published, his articles were published with me about the Russian bounties to the Taliban for killing U.S. soldiers. In this scenario that we are facing right now, or there is about to start, do you see such things happening again, third party playing their roles and affecting the U.S. interests?
I'm not sure I fully understand your question, but if you're saying, are we concerned about third parties threatening the United States? I mean, again, look.
Especially the Russians and the Iranians.
Well, look, if you look at the National Defense Strategy, it makes very clear what we highlight as threats against United States national security interests, to include Russia as an acute threat and to include malign activity by countries like Iran through their proxy groups. And so this Department of Defense works with our allies and partners around the world on a daily basis to protect U.S. national interests, as well as protecting our citizens and our service members who are serving around the world. So regardless of what those threats are, it's something we take very seriously and will continue to do so. But as it relates to any specific things like that, I don't have anything to provide.
One last one, John. Has the Pakistan military at all shared with you about the recent surge that I feel, especially from the Afghans, that the U.S. military and the State Department has resided in Pakistan, that they are working towards this separatist movement in this one state of Pakistan, which is just right next to Afghanistan?
You're talking about Baluchistan?
No, with Afghanistan, inside the Pashtun area, which I, for the last 40 years, have the paper in. Have they at all shared concerns like this? These concerns, from a journalist point of view, it comes all the way to Washington, D.C., to some of the journalists working in the Pashto radio. They seem to be all pushing the Afghans sitting over there and a couple of people here for this complete separatist movement of the Pashtun region and the Pashtun belt, and that's where you have all the TTP guys. So are you at all looking at this scenario keenly or no?
Look, I don't have anything to provide from the podium in terms of Pakistani military strategy. I mean, as we've discussed before, the U.S., of course, values Pakistan as a partner when it comes to areas like counterterrorism. And so we'll continue to have those conversations, but I'd refer you to the Pakistani military to discuss their operations and their counterterrorism efforts. All right, Goel, last question, man. Bring us home.
My question is, as far as Chinese hacking, how this building has been affected in any way? Because in the past also Chinese have been stealing or thieves U.S. secret in many ways, including businesses, industries, and also defense.
Yeah, I appreciate the question. As a matter of policy, we're not going to discuss, potential threats, hacks, etc. I can assure you this is something we take very seriously every single day. As you highlighted, it is a significant threat globally. And so, again, we'll continue to do due diligence and ensure that our networks and our personnel are able to operate safely and effectively around the world. Thanks very much, everybody. Appreciate it. And remember, we're in Syria for the Defeat ISIS mission. All right.